Please join me for a nostalgic look back at family mealtimes from the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s. What was once a daily ritual for families has changed in many ways over the years, but still remains an important part of family life. In the 1920s, refrigeration was still relatively new, so fresh fruits and vegetables were more limited than today. Casual family meals were eaten in the kitchen with oilcloth-covered tables and mismatched chairs. Meals often centered around hearty, preserved foods like pot roasts, boiled potatoes, canned vegetables, and baked goods made from scratch. Processed and prepackaged foods were rare. Families typically ate seasonally based on what was available locally. The day started early with a quick and simple breakfast. Typical fare included fried eggs, porridge, toast, pancakes or sausage with coffee or tea. Eggs came straight from the family chickens out back. Porridge was made from oats or cornmeal with milk and syrup. Toast was sliced from homemade loaves and toasted on the wood stove. The midday meal was known as dinner and considered the main meal of the day. Housewives and daughters spent the bulk of the morning preparing hearty dishes like pot roasts, boiled vegetables, and baked breads from scratch. Recipes were passed down for generations. Dishes were simple and comforting. The family gathered together each day, and mealtimes focused on conversation. The evening meal was a lighter supper with leftovers from noon. Bread, cheese, cold meats, and noodle dishes were common. Dessert was typically simple. Stewed fruits, custards, or pies made from lard crusts. Families discussed their day, stories from school or the farm, town gossip, church news. Dishes were washed in the dry sink or basin and carefully put away. The kitchen was scrubbed and prepped for the next day. In the 1930s, families often ate modest yet hearty home-cooked meals. With money tight, ingredients like beans, potatoes, carrots, and canned or fresh produce were inexpensive alternatives to meat, which was more costly. Typical dinner fare included dishes like vegetable stew, pot pie, fried potatoes and onions, baked beans, and bread. Desserts were simple. Think baked apples with cinnamon or rice pudding. Meal preparation was very labor-intensive without many of the modern conveniences we have today. Mothers and daughters worked together to peel, chop, bake, and cook over wood stoves. Recipes were passed down, and many families grew small home vegetable gardens to supplement the ingredients they could afford to buy. Some even kept chickens for eggs and meat. The dinner table served as a place not just for nourishment, but also for families to connect after busy days. It was a time to catch up, share stories from school or work, talk about the neighborhood happenings. For children, dinner time could be an opportunity to discuss lessons learned in school. For fathers, a chance to impart wisdom. Meals represented togetherness during periods of hardship and uncertainty. In some families, dinner times also involved listening to radio programs together. Popular evening radio shows in the 1930s included comedy hours like George Burns and Gracie Allen, as well as news and music programs. Huddled around the radio gave families another shared experience during mealtime. For struggling families, dinner table conversations sometimes focused on making ends meet. Difficult decisions about money and putting food on the table were weighed, but simple pleasures were also appreciated. The taste of a sweet dessert or the laughter ringing around the room. Even during the Great Depression, families found ways to cherish mealtimes. Due to food rationing during World War II, families in the 1940s had to get creative with their meals. Wheat and beef were less available, so pasta, organ meats, and pork became more common. Families grew victory gardens to supplement rations with homegrown vegetables like carrots, beans, and potatoes. Simple, filling meals were the norm. Think meatloaf, casseroles, boiled vegetables, salads, and potatoes. Desserts like jelly rolls, baked apples, rice puddings, and cookies, made with lard or vegetable shortening, were affordable treats. Mornings started early for homemakers, who first put on coffee or a grain-based substitute. Next, they might head outside to grab eggs from the chicken coop, or harvest vegetables from their victory garden, planted in the backyard. Bacon or sausage were fried up in a cast iron skillet on the stove. Eggs were scrambled or boiled. Toast was made from home-baked loaves. Fresh orange juice was hand-squeezed. The radio played as families fueled up for the day. Dinner, the day's main meal, involved more elaborate preparation. Meat that had been marinated overnight was roasted in the oven. Root vegetables like potatoes and carrots were peeled, chopped, and boiled. Canned goods like green beans were heated on the stovetop. Salads were freshly tossed. For dessert, pies or cookies were baked from scratch. Dishes were washed by hand and reused for supper. With rationing limiting appliances, from scratch cooking was essential. With no smartphones or TVs, Mealtimes offered a chance for families to truly engage with each other. Husbands and wives would catch up on their days. Kids would share details about school, friends, and hobbies. Families would discuss the war abroad and how it was affecting their lives. Rationing, victory gardens, scrap drives, and war bonds were common topics. Some had relatives fighting overseas and would share any news from the front lines. Mealtime offered a sense of normalcy and community during difficult times. After a long day, homemakers relied on leftovers, sandwiches, and simple egg or cheese dishes for supper. Remaining vegetables were made into salads or heated as side dishes. Canned tuna or spam were handy proteins. Jellies and jams stretched sweet treats like bread pudding. Dishes were simple to assemble after a tiring day. The icebox or refrigerator kept ingredients fresh. Mealtime in the 1940s was about coming together over simple, filling foods and sharing conversations that kept families connected. It offered comfort and stability in a challenging era. Though the food was humble, the company was priceless. I hope you enjoyed this nostalgic look back at family mealtimes, and as always, thank you for watching.